Have you ever wondered if there really is life after death? Join us on today's episode as we interview medium Sandra Martinez. She's going to give us her take on what it's like to talk to the other side. Welcome, Sandra. Hello. It's so good to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Melissa. Thank you for inviting me to this chat. I'm really excited to share with the world what mediumship really is and talk to you more about this.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so excited. So I know that there's many people out there that think that they know a little bit of what being a medium is like, but I think there probably are still a lot of questions on what this whole modality really covers. So just to get started, can you give us an idea or share with us the moment you realized that you had the gift of mediumship?
Well, that's an interesting question. And what I found is that most mediums actually don't fully know that they are mediums until they discover a class or they bump into someone and talk about the topic of mediumship. And that was very much the case with me. So well, my experience really began back in 2011, where I was traveling around India, exploring my spiritual aspects and wanting to go and live from this deeper aspect of who I was, the spiritual side of myself. And I kept being recommended to go and speak to this medium, this psychic medium that was very famous up in the north in Rishikesh, if you know it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go once I get up there and I'm going to speak to the guy. And I booked a session. And as soon as I got there, he told me I was going to be a psychic medium. And I was like, what is he talking about? Because I was like, I'm no psychic medium. And the reason why I thought that is because I had these ideas of what being a psychic medium was. And I thought a psychic medium was someone that saw spirit people all over the place that were having conversations all the time. And I was like, well, that's not me. And that's what that confusion led to me not believing that I was a medium. So he told me I'd be a medium, I'd be teaching people. And I just thought, it's not possible. I won't be doing that. I'm an accountant. So I've come from this very analytical mindset of being an accountant, loving numbers, and then having been told about this ability or skill that I didn't even think I possessed. So that started there. And then it was 10 years later where I was actually working as a dog trainer and behaviorist. And I started to pick up things about the dogs that I was training that no one really told me that was even possible. So wow. I could start seeing colors, I could start sensing their emotions, and I knew things that didn't logically make sense for me to know. So I knew their fears that would come up, or I'd get an image pop up of something they wanted to do. And in speaking to a psychic medium who was a friend at the time that this was happening, she told me, you're seeing the auras, you're connected to them psychically, and then you're a psychic medium. And that's where the exploration started. And it's just been fascinating since that's happened. So that's amazing. Communicating with the afterlife is very much possible.
That's amazing though, really. And probably was a little disconcerting. Thank goodness you had already had a heads up.
Exactly. Yes.
I know, right? Oh my goodness. And I think there are some people too that have specific experiences and they just, they discount it, or I'm using my imagination, or especially if you're somebody that started when you were very young, because, if you're telling your parents there's somebody in the room, what are they going to think?
And that's what tends to happen, because we've all got the ability, just that we get told that we're making it up, we've got an overactive imagination. And that may be the case, but it doesn't mean that what we're perceiving is not real. So we get those abilities pushed down in a way, and then we allow the analytical mind, the rational thinking to come through. And we're pushing aside those spiritual gifts that we're all born with to one extent or the other. So it's about reconnecting with those again as we get older or want to develop these abilities.
Exactly. Well, that actually kind of leads into my next question. So what would you say some of the challenges are that you faced in accepting and developing your abilities as a medium?
I think the acceptance kind of happen naturally, because when that medium told me that I was going to be a medium, there was something about what he said that felt true, although my logical mind didn't understand it. It was like, no, not possible. So there's this inner intuition that we have in our daily lives, that we know when things resonate with us and we know when things don't. So the challenges that can come in is very much a mental challenge of thinking that we're something or thinking that we're not. So part of the ego, really, that identity of who we are as a person. But I believe that the biggest challenges that what I found, and I believe most mediums find, is that we get bogged down with the techniques or the understanding of things. We want to know every little detail of what we need to do, how it should feel like, what are the stages, what are the steps, that we actually, in a way, move away from that natural ability that we all have to communicate. So we're so focused on doing the mediumship from that mental perspective that we forget to feel the connection that's there, that spiritual aspect of who we are. And we've all got it. You know, when you just meet someone and you just feel that connection and everything flows, it's just natural. There's a general enjoyment. Well, that's what mediumship should feel like. You want that enjoyment. The inquisitive mind is there, but it isn't overpowering. And that's what mediumship is. So I feel that the biggest challenge that mediums have nowadays, I'm not sure if this was the same type of training they received back in the 1800s or 1900s. Sure. I feel it's our over focus in, or being overly focused on the mechanics and the doing from that mental perspective, as opposed to the surrendering and allowing these experiences to come through. Yeah.
I love how you talk about having that experience of being an explorer and opening yourself up to that childlike energy. Because I found that with even my own practice, learning how to be a psychic or anything that has to do in this subtle world, is that the more I'm willing to give it a playful feel and just let go, it happens so much easier. And I try to keep telling myself that, but it's hard, to let go sometimes. So Sandra, how has your connection with the spirit world influenced your personal beliefs and really your outlook on life?
Well, it's definitely changed my life completely. And I think the biggest thing that has transformed is that when I started on this spiritual journey in 2011, that trip to India, what I was doing is I was connecting to the spiritual aspect of myself, but it was gathering knowledge and feeling that knowledge had a truth to it. And I feel we all go through this, where we read something and it just touches your heart or it moves you in some way. And I feel that that's the first stage of awakening, in a way, because you're getting these truths. They're touching this part of you that's non-physical. It's a spiritual part of who you are, comes to life. But what tends to happen is that you then go on in your life talking about these things from a past perspective. It's from that knowledge that you gained in the past. And what's missing is the freshness of the present moment. So what do I mean by this? I mean that those truths keep appearing in your life, but they're felt. They're not an experience that has happened in the past. They're an experience that's born in the moment. And this is what I've noticed, that you can say the same things, but you can either be connected with your soul, so speaking through the soul, or who you are on this physical earth as a spiritual being, or you can speak from the mind. And what spirit has taught me through the mediumship development is that I have to be able to surrender to the spirit of who I am and bring these truths to life, in a way, through the soul, through the expression. And what happens in these moments is that your life gets touched, the people around you get touched, and they want to hear more. Whereas when I think back to like 2011, I was so excited about the mediumship and these, about the spiritual awakening and these experiences that I was having, and I wanted to share them with everyone. But they weren't receiving it through the soul. It was more of an intellectual excitement that was there. Now I feel that these truths are coming from the soul level, and I feel they're having a greater reach, not only to support clients, but also to help those in the spirit world and people around me. That's what I would say is one of the biggest changes there.
I love that. I do. I've had so many healings. Um, it's funny. So being new to this, right? I'll have family members that come through and I'm like, oh, okay. Really? But it's been a healing for them and for me to,
Yes.
as you said, to see it from a different perspective. And now things that used to bother me, I was like, oh, I think I'm over it, but do I really want to talk to them? And now it's really a different perspective. It really is. The healing that's happened is amazing. All right. So that actually might be something that someone would be curious about. You don't have to go into your whole process, but just a taste of how would you describe, connecting with the other side? What's the kind of your process of connecting?
So everyone will connect in slightly different ways, but the process that we use to connect with the spirit world is to quieten the mind. And that's important because when you've got a busy mind, what will happen is you can't hear the voice of intuition. And the difference is between the voice in your head where your thoughts are thinking and the voice of intuition is that it's a low, subtle, quiet, gentle voice. So if you're unable to quieten those thoughts, you will not think that you're intuitive at all, although we're all born with it. But you will assume that that's not who you are, that you don't receive intuition from the spirit world or even from consciousness itself. So quieten the mind, relaxing the body are important. And those are the first two stages that everyone should do if they want to develop their mediumship. But then what happens is you start to raise your awareness to the spirit world. And this is using your connection to the soul to connect to a higher power within. And in essence, you're finding that divinity because we're all divine beings. And you will see this as you go through your mediumship development or even your spiritual path if you're going through it. And it's not from that mind perspective. It's sensing that divine part of who you are and then connecting to this higher power. You can call it consciousness, the divine, God, whatever you're comfortable with. But that's what we're doing there. And in doing so, we're creating the conditions so that the spirit world can communicate with us. And it's like dialing in. Do you know when you tune into radio or you dial in and call someone, you're finding that right frequency so that you can be receptive.
Right.
And that can take some time and practice. So it's not learned overnight for everyone.
So that's interesting. If you were somebody that is doing that, right? They're starting out and they're quieting themselves. What does it feel like? I mean, if you were to describe to somebody who's never experienced it, what does it feel like to communicate with a spirit being?
For me, it just feels divine. And there's a calmness to it. There's a sense of going home. It's very difficult to put into words, but you've just got this feeling of peace, connection, love. And it really feels like a familiar space. It doesn't feel like something you've discovered. It feels like you've gone home and you're right where you need to be. And then the information starts coming through in various ways. You may feel things, you sense things about a spirit person during a reading. You may get images. So it can work in many ways. You can receive information in many ways, but the underlying conditions are that feeling of love, connection, compassion is there, and a wanting to help as well. So this is one of the things that I've noticed, that unless there's a real need or a real desire to help, those conditions don't always flourish. So it's a wanting to be of service that's important as well.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. I like that. Yeah, I think that would answer a lot of questions for many people. So based on all the work that you've done over the past several years, what would you say? What do you believe happens after we leave this earthly body?
Nothing. And that sounds funny, but it all starts with our perception. We tend to think that So we've got the idea, we know that we're spiritual beings having a human existence, but the misconception is that we think that our soul is within the body. And this is what I thought for many years, but I've started to get the information come through from spirit that that's not the case. So we're actually, in a way, bathing in the consciousness, in the divine consciousness, and then we're experiencing those waves of individual consciousness, which we're able to attune to. And what I can say it almost feels like you've got the password to log in. So if we think of ourselves as the computers, the ones that can receive, for instance, we've got the password and the username for that particular wave of consciousness. And what we're doing is we're tuning into that consciousness, and we're able to have this divine experience in life connected to source. But we don't always realize that we are connected to source. So when we pass away, the spirit doesn't, or the consciousness doesn't go anywhere, because consciousness is everywhere. We're breathing it, we're bathed in the consciousness itself. It's just the body that disappears. And that's why we're able to then connect into the consciousness of other individuals, because in essence, they're unlocking that password and username, and we're getting the ability to experience what it was like to be them as a human being. So we're using our physical senses, our emotions, and our mind to decode those messages and experiences. And it really does feel amazing when you're able to do that.
It does. Oh my gosh. I can attest to that. I was just thinking of that as you were explaining that, just helping other people have loved ones come through, and you hit on that message, that feeling that they so wanted to get across. It's like, it can be really, really touching. And I don't know, that's what I get the most out of mediumship, is being able to help somebody receive something from a loved one and really be able to feel it and know that they're loved. And that's usually the message that I get over and over, is it's all about love. Well, actually, what would you say is the most common message that spirits want to share with their loved ones?
I agree with what you've just said. The messages always come from a place of love, connection. And our family and friends, they want to uplift us. They want to support us in their lives. And that's what makes this communication so amazing, that you could be going through a difficult period in your life, and they'll pop in and they'll know what to say, because they're your loved ones. And that's the thing. So the message can come up in different forms. It is a loving message. It is an uplifting message. So for example, just yesterday I had a reading where the sister of a client wanted to talk about the travels that she didn't get to do when she was here. So she passed away. Her health issues affected her ability to travel. And she came to tell her loved one that she would be accompanying her on her travels. And interestingly enough, what was so amazing is that she told me she'd been asking her if she would go with her. So she's been feeling her around, her sister's spirit around. And interesting, she had been asking her sister, please come with me, please join me on these trips. And that was like the validation that she needed to hear, that her sister had been hearing her thoughts, her prayers, the askings, that all the questions that she'd been putting out to her. And it was that validation that made her feel so connected to her sister. And going on this trip is so much more exciting now for her, just because of knowing that she's going to be doing the trip with her sister who is in spirit.
That's awesome. I had a similar experience just this last month. That's so funny. I do often do that. If I'm going on a trip or I'm going to do something different, I'll in my mind say, hey, anybody else wants to come, you're welcome. And then I'll have a reading and those beings will talk about it. And I'm like, well, I guess they did. They all came. How fun was that for all of us?
Exactly. And they know when we need their help, because some people ask me, like, is the spirit world around us, just watching us all the time? And in a way, it can sound a little creepy, just thinking that everyone's around watching. And it's not really like that. They'll come in when our soul calls them to come in. So if, for example, we're planning on that trip and we're a little worried or concerned about what may happen or the uncertainty of things, they'll come in to reassure us. They'll come in and say, hey, don't worry, we've got your back. or if you're planning a career move, and that can be pretty daunting for everyone, not just some people, but am I going in the right direction? They'll come in and they'll bring through, this is what I find so amazing. They'll bring through their own experience of similar situations. So they might talk about their fears that arose at a particular time in their life and how they felt. And what they're doing is they're becoming relatable, just like they would when they were here. They're telling you about their fears, their experiences, and they're saying, look, this is what I did and it worked for me, or this is what I did and then I ended up feeling like I let that opportunity go by. So they're bringing through their experiences as evidence, but then they're also telling you how you can move forward. And that's, I feel, the most amazing thing about mediumship, that every reading is different. They're all full of love and connection and compassion and support, but they're all unique. That's the amazing part. Yeah.
I love that. I do. I know at first I thought this is a little weird, but then I started thinking about it. I'm like, if it were me, I would be checking in with my family members. I'd want to make sure that they're doing okay. So, I mean, it's all about love. So it totally makes sense. Actually, that brings up another question. When you are, with your own loved ones, have they ever talked about what they do? What are they doing in the afterlife?
Various things. Well, I've got a strong affinity with the animal kingdom. And so the animals tend to come to me a lot. And what I find is that the animals tend to have, it feels like they create another version of their life that they've had, that they've enjoyed. And the majority of the times, the life that they've chosen has an element of similarity. So for example, if they lived near a golf course and they particularly enjoyed spending time there, their heaven will have an element of that, although it won't look identical. So we're able to create a vision of what heaven is to us. And a lot of the times when we cross over, we do carry those memories and we carry those emotions, and we want to relive those beautiful moments. So we're creating a heaven with all the great pieces that we enjoyed here, and with obviously connecting with those that have crossed over. But it can look completely different. I've had ones that are up on a mountain, like visions of people living up on the mountain, completely secluded. I've had images or situations where they've been right by the beach and there's been like a certain routine walking by the beach. So it really varies. It's never been the gates and the clouds in the sky, I can tell you that. But it's been everything else in between. Yeah.
I love that. I love talking about the animal experience too. My mother-in-law had therapy dogs, right? So she was very much into that. And she had one that had passed away. And that animal comes to me a lot. If there's somebody that I'm working with that needs what they have to offer, whether that be comfort or it's another animal. And then she had a dog that was unfortunately at the end of life. And we were at the vet's taking care of it and helping that ease their way into the afterlife. And I called that dog in, and I knew they were there. One, I could see them, but as the dog was going under, that was about to leave this world, they just had so much joy. They just, even the vet tech said, "Oh my gosh, it's like they're running." And I just had this vision of these two dogs running through the hills, and I'm like, it's a beautiful experience. What any being can do for another, even when they're crossing over, it's quite beautiful. So, Sandra, have you ever encountered spirit beings or energies that were difficult to work with?
So this is an interesting question, and it's one that often doesn't get answered fully. So I'll say yes to spirit people that had difficulty connecting with. And this can be actually for many reasons. So not all of us are able to communicate in the same way, even in the physical life. And this can actually happen when we've crossed over. So some people in the spirit world come through as clear as possible. You understand everything about their personality, their life experience. They want to divulge everything to the person, to the medium, and then to their loved ones. But there's also spirit people that are reserved. And I think that we don't normally consider this because we as mediums expect them all to come through really clearly, to give through the information as perfectly as possible. But they're not always able to do this. And this could be because it's the first time that they're coming through. It could be because our energies aren't very well matched. That's another possibility. So just like here in the physical world, there's certain people that you just connect with and you just flow. Do you know that feeling where the conversation just keeps going and there's this understanding on a deeper level? But that doesn't happen with everyone. And it's the same thing in the spirit world. So as individual mediums, we've got to be able to open ourselves up to understand all types of people, not only in our physical life, but in our mediumship. And that involves trusting that the spirit person will bring through the information in the best way that they can, and that we're open and receptive to whoever comes through. So it's important here that we don't have any ideas of what a good communication is, or that our ego comes in and says, oh no, we're going too slow, or she's not getting specific, she's not giving me, or he's not giving me specific evidence, or whatever thoughts come up in the moment. These can cause difficulties, but it actually isn't a bad thing. It's just that we're allowing the spirit person to communicate in the way that they can. In terms of other challenges with the mediumship, what can happen is they can be super emotionally charged. And I talk about this a lot in my mediumship development courses, that it can be challenging when you get overwhelmed. So imagine there's been a situation that's been difficult for the family, and just put yourself in that position right now. Just put yourself in that position right now. If you've gone through a difficult or traumatic experience, it's difficult for you to talk about these things, and you may feel a little guarded, and you may not find the right words, and it can make you feel emotionally overwhelmed. Well, that is what can happen when you're receiving messages from the spirit world. They can actually make you feel overwhelmed because you're connecting on that soul to soul level. And you might find that your emotions get triggered, and that can sometimes be difficult because we want to maintain this professional outer look. We want to keep appearances, and that's where the ego comes in. But actually, that's probably one of the worst things you can do, because what you're not allowing is that authenticity. And think about it. Connection comes through emotion. When you've been speaking to someone and there's been that vulnerability and that sense of connection, that's there because both people have been open. So if as a medium you're not open to being vulnerable or being seen as being vulnerable, that can definitely affect your ability and cause problems with connecting with the spirit world. In terms of, have I encountered anything negative? Absolutely not. What I find is that this question comes up a lot, and there's a fear related to what can happen. Is a spirit person going to possess me? And what I will say to people out there is that those are fears that we have, but when you're actually experiencing the connection with the spirit world, that is not the case, because it is a partnership with those in the afterlife. And just like you build a friendship or a relationship with someone, it doesn't happen overnight. It's an ongoing process of trust and understanding from both sides. And that's what I feel is important to mention, because we do have these fears and they do need to be spoken about. And if we are wanting to communicate with the afterlife and these fears are there, what we're going to do is we're going to keep our vibration very low, and the spirit communication will not be successful. And then we may doubt, are we mediums? Are we not mediums? And all these other doubts creep in due to the fear that can arise. Yeah.
Perfect. Actually, that leads very much into the next question that I have. How do you validate those messages when you receive them for your clients?
So there are various types of mediumship out there, and it really depends which type of mediumship you're doing. So most people know about evidential mediumship, and this is where we're bringing through evidence from the spirit world to validate that we're with them. But there's other types of mediumship, such as trance, which is slightly different. It's about channeling wisdom and spiritual insights from other beings. So it could be spirit guides, you could be your team, your ascended masters, and there's also interdimensional channeling as well. So that's where you're bringing through information from other dimensions, and also there's ET, so people bring in extraterrestrial channeling as well. So they're very different, these two. And then there's obviously physical mediumship, where that involves having physical phenomena. So the type of mediumship where you are getting this confirmation is called evidential mediumship. And what I love about this type of mediumship is the one that I do evidential and trance as well, but that you're getting this confirmation. So when the spirit person gives you some information, you're relaying this to your client and you're getting them to say either yes or no. You're not wanting any information from them. So what we don't want is our client to tell us anything, because that defeats the whole purpose of proving that we've got this person here that we say we have. So we want to be able to bring through specific evidence. And this could be as simple as talking about their personality, what they were like with you, or what they were like with other people. They may talk about certain experiences that they've had, a shared memory. And what tends to happen is, like during Christmas, the loved ones want to come and talk about those Christmas holidays that they're missing and that they're there with you. So they'll bring through these specific experiences where you were around the table. Maybe you were playing games or like board games, or you were going for long walks up a mountain. So they will bring through the specific evidence to prove that they are still with you. And what is magical about evidential mediumship is that when you connect to the spirit person and you get this information, there's also an overwhelming feeling that is felt in the room. And even if it's done online, it's still felt across the screen, that you feel they're there. And this is something that I love, because someone can tell you about an experience and you say, well, maybe they did some research, or maybe they were just doing some general points, or maybe they were cold reading. And that's fine. I'm not saying that that may not happen somewhere around the world, but when the evidence is so specific that no one else knew about it, and you know it's true because you've experienced it with that person, no one can take that experience away from you, because you've been touched on that deeper level, and the information has been absolutely true. So I feel that that's very important in mediumship, and we need to make sure that in our mediumship, this does occur, that we are getting the validations and that we're not giving these general readings that aren't as useful for our clients.
I appreciate that. Actually, that makes me think. So we've talked about people maybe suspicioning that they
Yes.
have this, or they would like to investigate that further. What advice would you give to someone who feels like that they would like to investigate mediumship? How would they proceed?
So what I would say, the first thing you should do is grab some books. You can definitely start reading up on the topic and getting experiences from mediums. You can watch YouTube videos, whatever resonates with you. But if you're serious about developing these abilities, I would say it's important to sign up to a course. And I would do this with an experienced medium. So what I find is that initial process of development is extremely important. And what can happen is, if you've had a bad experience, that can then affect you going forward. And you may actually think that you're not a medium, or mediumship isn't for you. So what I would say is make sure that you get a medium that you feel comfortable with, that you resonate with, and that has experience and that is working with mediumship on a professional level. And if you do this, you will be able to get a lot more than maybe going with someone that isn't as experienced, because they'll be able to share those things that they learned along the way. they'll be able to talk about these fears that creep up when we're doing this work. And they'll teach you to connect and attune your body in a way that you're connecting from this place of love. And that's important. I mentioned this earlier on. When we're connecting with the spirit world, we want to be connecting at this high frequency. And this is the frequency of love and compassion. But we also need to be authentic. And this is when we take our mediumship to a whole new level. We explore our abilities at a whole new level. So I would say that if you want to develop, sign up to a course. I do teach some courses online. So I've got various workshops that I do on trance. I do on mediumship for beginners. And there's one that I recommend every medium does, regardless of the level that they have. And this one's called Blending with Spirit. And what that course does is it teaches you to build this trusting, loving connection with the spirit world. It's about addressing those fears, overcoming limiting beliefs, and really awakening that divine part of who you are. So it's a holistic approach, basically, to mediumship development. And the great thing about it, and what's unique that you won't find anywhere else, is that the approach that I use has this self-categorization where you can actually see what type of medium you are based on your soul's expression. And that's something that the spirit world channeled to me as something important that needed to be assessed and moved into the mediumship development side of things, and which hasn't actually been done before. So that's what I would say. Sign up to a course. If you want to know more about mine, you can visit my website, sandramartinez.co.uk.
Yeah. And I can validate that for our viewers as well. I have taken or am taking this blending course with Sandra, and I've done mediumship, and I do a practice pretty regularly with one particular person that sometimes we struggle for them to receive what I'm getting. And so I've switched to doing this particular technique. I now do it anyway, but specifically with this person, and it has changed our reading night and day. All of a sudden now, when I have a feeling to go with what the experience is, or I can see it from that inner space, it's made a world of difference in how they're able to receive the message. So I highly recommend any of Sandra's courses. They're quite helpful. Let's see. Oh, here's something really, really interesting. Just a few quick tips if you can think about it. Are there any practices or habits that you recommend for strengthening intuition and spiritual connection?
Yes, there are loads of things that you can do. So the first one I would say is start looking at your life in general. We tend to think of our spiritual development as one thing, and then our mediumship development as another thing, and our ability to communicate as another ability. But actually, what we do and what we can develop in our general life, in our physical human life, translates or transfers into our mediumship. So if you see that there's a particular area in your mediumship that's struggling, for instance, I get a lot of people that say, my analytical mind just gets into my mediumship and then I'm second guessing myself, or I'm doubting my abilities. What I would say is, that's something that you're also doing outside of your mediumship. So one of the things that I think is important is personal development as part of this spiritual development and growth. And anything you can do to start observing, understanding that why those things happen, why we react in a certain way, understanding our mind, understanding our emotional aspect of ourselves, that's going to help you with your mediumship. It's not only going to support your communication, but it's actually going to awaken the actual psychic senses or intuitive senses. And you're also going to be leading a life that is more in line with that spiritual or the spiritual values that we have. Other things I would say, if you're starting off, start listening to your intuition, even if it's just something that doesn't make sense. Just say, okay, I heard you. I'm going to go in that direction, even though my mind doesn't understand it. And that's important, because what I hear a lot of the times is, I'm not very intuitive, or I don't have very strong intuition. And then when I ask questions about this, and I'm like, well, Do you listen to your intuition in your daily life? Well, yeah, but sometimes it's not convenient, or sometimes our mind comes in and tells me that I should do something else. Well, start off there. Start listening to that intuition, acting on those little things. And what you'll notice is that your mind will start quieting down, and that intuition, the voice of the intuition, will start becoming louder. And we can only do this if our minds are calm, if our bodies are relaxed. So getting that meditative practice is important. Another thing that I always mention is grounding. And this is physical grounding and also spiritual grounding. They're slightly different. So yes, you can go outside and put your feet out, take your feet out and just rest them against the ground. If it's in the park or a beach, you can even like walk into the water if you're by the sea. So these practices are important and help ground your body, but there's also a grounding element on the physical level. And it isn't talked about very much, because we think as grounding is just rooting our energy, but there's two parts. There's the physical grounding and the spiritual grounding. So if, for example, you feel your energy's up high, you're feeling a little ungrounded, do grounding meditations, and then also add the physical grounding, and that will be very powerful. And the last thing I would say is when you're doing this spiritual development, sign up to classes, courses, or weekly groups where you can have this support and start building your abilities. So remember that when we're working psychically, we don't need that connection to the spirit world. So you're using your senses to perceive the environment around you, the physical sense. You're using the non-physical senses to interpret information about people, the environment, could be animals as well. But when we're trying to develop the mediumship, we do need to go a step further. And this is something I talk about in the course, about attuning your energy. And that can take some time, and it can bring stuff up to the surface. It can bring emotions up. It can bring certain things that we've experienced that need clearing. So it's a gradual process of attuning and raising your awareness to the spirit world. And that type of meditation is called sitting in the power. So if you're interested in doing psychic development, go ahead, find any type of mediumship, any type of meditation out there that you find interesting or that resonates with you. But if you want to take your mediumship to the next level, you definitely need to sit in the power. And this has an element of attunement and raising your energy to feel the spirit world.
You have that meditation on your website. Is that correct, Sandra?
Yes, there's a free meditation on there. You might need to go and check out my video on what is sitting in the power. And I do give you a code on there to get the meditation for free. Yes.
Perfect. So, Sandra, to conclude, our final big question of the day, if you could leave one universal message for the world based on your mediumship, what would it be?
It would be that we're all divine beings. And I know this sounds a little cliche, but bear with me for a moment. What I've learned through the mediumship itself is that we are divine beings. We've all got that connection to the divine spark. The only thing that takes us or appears to take us away from this divinity is the mind. So I would recommend or suggest that everyone, as you go about your life, start looking for that divinity within the others. And what you'll find is that the more that you see that inner beauty and sparkle in everyone else, you start to see it within yourself. And I would say that's probably the greatest practice that you can possibly have in your daily life. Seek out that divine connection in the other and perceive it within yourself.
All right, Sandra, just tell everyone where they can find you. I know you have a website, you have social media channels, so just kind of give everybody an idea where they can research some of the things that you offer, and then we'll also include those in the description below.
Perfect. So I do offer various services. So I teach animal communication. I also teach psychic and mediumship development. And I've got a variety of workshops as well. So if you're not sure if you want to go into it full steam ahead and do an 8-week course, you can try out the workshops. And these are 4-hour workshops on different aspects. There are introduction workshops to mediumship, psychic development, aura reading, trance healing, trance speaking. So there's loads of stuff on there. And that's on my website, sandramartinez.co.uk. If you just want to read about things, you can also visit my blog post on there. And I've got over 170 blogs on there. So that will definitely get you started and give you a lot of information. If you do want a one-to-one session with me, you can also book on there. And yeah, follow me on Facebook or Instagram. So my handle is Sandra Martinez Medium. So you can follow me on there. And I've also got a YouTube channel, which is also Sandra Martinez Medium. And I'll be doing more videos on how you can develop your mediumship, psychic abilities, and also spiritually grow.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for joining us today. I mean, you're a talented medium, but you're obviously a very talented teacher. And I think that will help a lot of people that had questions. You know, we all have questions about topics that come up, even if it's something we've dabbled in for a while. It's always great to get another perspective. So thanks for joining us today. And everyone, be sure to check the information down below so that you can find those links that we talked about. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Thanks again.